And so God cared about what he created and made sure that what they needed was there.
Good. Yes. Yes. Yeah. The way he sustains it is kind of interesting, right? That there's these sort of natural processes that the psalmist describes, but he describes them to remind us that God is behind all of them. This creation, it ticks along pretty well. All the movement all works together well, but God is in charge of it all. God is behind all of it.
I think what hits me, I love this psalm, is the simplicity of it. I love the second line, "You are very great."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember years ago when I read this and I go, well, that sums it up, right? And then of course he goes through the whole speaking about all the things you're saying, but I just love the simplicity and the opening. I can relate to you're very great. You're just awesome. And that says it all about who God is. And I love the way that this is written.
Yeah, good. Yeah, absolutely. There's just this. Yeah, I mean, clothed with majesty and splendor, but very great, and the superlative of that, and just that when all other words fail, that's what you can say about God, and that's what we see in the creation around us.
And I think also it makes me think, he wraps himself in the light, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a participation there, that this is his creation, but he's within it and above it and around it and through it. That if we pause in our day, it's what you said a few weeks ago, how you sat on your patio and you were able to just see creation and think about, but we can see God in his creation because he fully participates. He just then put us here, and then we can't find him, but we can find him in his creation. And I think the psalm says that, how he wraps himself, he lays the being, he's present.
The wind is his messenger. I like that.
Yeah.
God, the wind is his messenger. Flames of fire are his servants. Is that lightning? Maybe I'm not sure. But the idea of it, that in those natural occurrences around us, just the things we see and the effects of the weather, and God is using that. God is using that to send his messages. Yeah, good. What else?
Creation is an ongoing process, and that's what I see in this psalm. Sometimes we think of creation as that thing that happened in Genesis at the beginning of everything. And in this psalm, it's much more, God, as we've, mentioned before, God making sure all the living things have their food, and giving life to new living things, and pouring his spirit into them. That's all part of creation too. And it's a process that's, that you can see all around you each and every day.
Good. Yeah. The language he uses, when you hide your face, they're terrified. When you take away their breath, they die and return to dust. And you probably know, when you send it's the same word, breath, spirit, wind, same word. So you take away their breath and you send their breath, and new life is created. And again, it echoes Genesis, right? The man became a living being because God breathed into him the breath of life. And so, yeah, so you have this, I think that's an excellent point, that creation is this ongoing process. Creation and new creation and recreation. And we sometimes think of God as being absent, perhaps. But the world is supposed to remind us of his presence, and he's always with us, and that he's always a part of this world around us. We get into bad habits with our speech sometimes. We talk about the world over against God. There's followers of God, and there's people in the world, you know, and we have to be careful with that. That's not unbiblical language, but we have to be careful with that because we can develop this bad habit of thinking that creation is sort of somehow absent of God, and that you know that we're looking for this new creation but that's not the way the Bible, what the Bible says about our creation. The world is good, and God is a part of this creation and present in it. But despite the sins of human beings, despite the ways that we've twisted his creation.
I think his creation is
I like the, oh, go ahead, Dan.
pictured very much as alive, you know. Everywhere we look on the earth, there's life, right?
Yeah.
If you go down to the bottom of the sea or up in the air, wherever you go, is life. It's in contrast to like the moon, you know, or Mars, you know, it's very desolate, dead. So I think we could contrast that a little bit.
And even in the
We
places
have a very alive planet, you know, to live in.
even in the places you don't expect. I remember when Josh was a little kid, we were in San Diego, and we were at this beach, and we went down on the rocks where there were these tide pools, and it was, you know, where the tide would come in and then go out and leave the rocks exposed. But in the depressions in the rocks, there were these little pools of water that were left. And you started looking in there, and there were all sorts of little things swimming around and clinging to the side of the rocks and living in those. And it was like a whole ecosystem that lived in those little tide pools that were created just by the tide coming in and out. It was just kind of amazing to me. And it's always stuck with me that even, like you say, Dan, even in the places you don't necessarily think to look, there's life, and God is at work, and there's this life is, God is all about life. God is all about living things. Death is not what God is about. God is all about bringing life, and so I guess it's
He created everything to sustain life.
Yeah, he created everything to sustain life. It's good, yeah. Because and this psalm talks a lot about the sustaining of life, right? That God has designed. I mean, look at all. I mean, just think about all the ways that God sustains life. It talks about well, first of all, God covered the watery depths, covered the earth with the watery depths. The waters stood above the mountains. The earth was without form and void, and water was, and darkness was on the face of the water. But God caused the sea to go to its assigned places, right? At your rebuke, the waters fled. They flowed over the mountains. They went down into the valleys to the place you assigned for them. You set a boundary they cannot cross. Never again will they cover the earth. What's that a reference to?
Flood.
The flood, right? Noah's flood, right? God's promise. What's that, Diana?
Well, that sounds like the promise that God made to Noah.
Right. Exactly. So the springs then give water to the beasts and the donkeys, and the birds of the sky nest there, and the land is satisfied by the fruit of his work. He makes grass grow for the cattle and plants for people to cultivate, bringing forth food from the earth, wine and oil and bread. All that comes from God. You know, well, wait a minute. God doesn't. There's not a bread tree. You know, there's not a. You know, what are you talking about? Well, but God brings the growth and the flourishing and the thriving and the life that creates a world that human beings can exist in, and we can do our part as well, right? It talks about the. I love how it talks about the. You've got the moon marking the seasons, and the sun knows when to go down. So you bring darkness, it becomes night, and what comes out at night? Well, the nocturnal predators come out at night, right? And they prowl and they roar for their prey, and they seek their food from God. And then the sun comes up, and what do the predators do? Well, they go lie down, right? They go to their den and lie down. And now it's time for the human beings to get up And now we can do our work in the world. And I think the implication is, and we don't have to worry about lions, you know, because they're in their dens, and we do our work in the daytime. It's kind of a neat thing. I just like the sort of rhythm of creation that's talked about in this song.
You know what fascinates me is it's like during the creation and everything, and God produced the food for people to eat, and they knew how to use the leaves, the grains, you know. It's just, I don't know, kind of odd, you know. They knew what to put together to make a meal.
Figured it out at least, right? Maybe trial and error, but they figured it out. I always, my question was always, who was the first person to eat a crab? You ever thought about that? Who was the first person to say, "Hey, this thing looks like it'd be good to eat"? It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Maybe they saw some other animal that eats crabs eating it and thought, well, if they can do it, maybe I can too.
And you know, an olive have oil in it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's just all the stuff that and God sort of, I guess, left some of that for us. I'm not aware of a cookbook that's part of the Bible, right? God sort of left that for us to pick up and figure out as we discovered how to use this creation for sustain life. And we still are figuring that out, right? We're still sort of figuring out how to do that. And sometimes we make a mess of it and do it badly, but we're still figuring out how to live with the creation and live in ways that help us to live, but also takes into account the fact that not all the resources around us are infinite, and we need to be aware of that too.
Well,
I like the fact that
how
go ahead,
God
Diana.
set things in motion to operate in a certain way, and mankind has often, tried to change it. Like, I think where was it down in? Was it in Australia, where there was some kind of thing that they wanted to get under control, so they brought in, I think it was rabbits, and to eat something that was causing problems for them, but there are no natural predators in Australia to
for rabbits
control the rabbits, so the rabbits are they're out of control, because I mean, what is this expression, breed like a rabbit?
Right.
So we think that we're so smart, and we're going to interfere with the way God has set up the world, and how many times have we made a mess of it?
I grew up in Chattanooga, and it was kudzu. What's the story of kudzu? It's I think they brought in kudzu to feed goats or something. If I
No, they really brought it in to control erosion.
Control erosion, that was it. Control erosion. And then they tried to bring in goats to eat the kudzu because.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But then they found out that there was nothing that would kill kudzu. We had nothing to kill kudzu, so it grew over buildings, literally. It grew over houses. It grew over trees. Then they found out they could bring in goats who would eat the kudzu. Helps with the problem.
Yeah. So I mean, and the kudzu was to solve another problem, like the rabbits were. But yeah, we don't do it nearly as well as God did it, and often when we monkey with it, we create problems for ourselves.
Full of it. It's full of it in
God
Georgia.
was the first and the best ecologist.
Right.
So many people are studying ecology nowadays. But.
Right. Colette, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, we're talking about the provision of God and how he takes care of us. But I love in verse 15 and 16 about it's not only the physical that he takes care in us, but he gladdens our heart. He oils our faces, and he helps us to be happy. But he also concerns himself, and he provides for us to be emotionally happy, emotionally secure. And I think all that's important because we can be well fed and miserable, or we can be well fed and also sustained in our hearts, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that verse 15.
Mhm.
The you know the the ways God gives us these good things, and so read verse 15, and
So it's okay
when it's time again, go out to a restaurant and enjoy a meal, because God's giving you that, right? And when it's time, enjoy the things that God gives us. Enjoy the creation that He surrounds us.
You know,
Okay,
the one thing I miss the most, because I love eating, is being a vegan and vegetarian, and Jade would probably resonate with this, is that I don't get to eat Doritos anymore. I used to love Doritos. I almost ate a pack a day every day. And so now I just walk by and go, oh. So same thing with cheese too, but
Right.
it delights your heart to have that favorite dish of ice cream or whatever you enjoy. And that's one way to sustain us through those provisions as well.
And instead of saying, well, that's frivolous, or well, that's the way God made us, and that's the way God
Mhm.
gave us our creation. Diana, were you saying something? I didn't quite catch it.
And it's
Sorry,
okay to
Diana.
drink wine.
It's okay. What?
To drink wine.
Oh, to drink wine. Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of God's creation. The Bible also warns against drunkenness. The Bible also warns against overindulgence. But absolutely, that's part of God's creation. So we
Do it in moderation.
yeah, I mean, you recognize, I mean, Colette, like Doritos, you can eat too many Doritos, right?
Or not enough.
What's that?
Or not
Not enough, right? Right.
I miss them.
You can overindulge in the creation. You absolutely can. You can make it the end instead of the means. You can. Paul talks about worshiping the creation instead of the creator. You can do that, and that's never good. That's always a problem. That's always outside of what God has intended for us. But our creation is for us and for our benefit and our blessing, and for the blessing of other creatures of God. And I think maybe that's a good thing to remember as we start talking about the creation being for us. That can lead to all sorts of irresponsible behavior too. But God cares about those other creatures, apparently, and wants them to be sustained. People go out to their work. We're part of the routine. We're part of the sustaining of creation. Work in the Psalms would be what? I mean, not going to be an accountant or a lawyer, or what are they doing? Most people.
Harvesting.
What's that?
I said harvesting.
Growing their food and cultivating and doing the things you have to do to sustain life, and so people are a part of this. I like there's the sea, vast and spacious, and see to understand the sea was in the ancient Near East. The sea was, I mean, it was a mysterious place. It was a terrifying place. There was no way to live out there. You were out of your element, literally. And so you could go out in a ship, but there were storms and there were huge creatures out there. And in the ancient Near Eastern mythology, there was a Leviathan, and there was all these terrible things that could happen to you out there. And part of creation was that God had tamed the sea and kept it in its place so that people could survive and could sustain life. Order out of chaos. The creation, first and foremost in Genesis, is about order. God has ordered this thing. And the Psalm is about order, right? This routine, this system. But look, the sea, this terrifying place. There's creatures beyond number out there, living things large and small. Life is out there even, and the ships go to and fro. And Leviathan, who you formed to frolic there. The picture is maybe I mean, maybe it's whales or something that's being referred to, but the picture is maybe of this mythical sea creature, and instead of being all terrifying and scary, he's out there frolicking in the water too. You know, he's all part of God's creation, and this terrifying creature that in mythology is a god itself, in the psalm is just something else God has created, just something else that is out there in the water, and it's okay. He's not so scary because God is in charge. God's in control. All creatures look to you to give them their food at the proper time. I always like that. You know, all of creation is depending on God. What else?
Yeah, I think one thing
I'll
the
have, oh,
Go ahead, Dan.
I say one thing the psalm is saying is that there are a lot of systems of life out there,
Mhm.
right? If we looked at anywhere we look, there's different systems, and God's in charge of all of them. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
mhm.
He can do it all at once, all at once.
Linda, what were you going to say?
I forgot.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Remember, just break in. Yeah, so what's the result? What is the psalm? What's the conclusion the psalm comes to? Well, may God's glory endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works. I kind of, that struck me reading this, and I had not paid attention to that so much before, but that line struck me. May the Lord rejoice in his works. What does that mean?
Be happy about what he's done.
Yeah, I think be happy about it. Again, I'm reminded of the creation story. God saw what he had created, and it was good.
Good.
He rejoiced in his works. And I want to be one of the works God rejoices in, incidentally. You know, and the things I do, I want to be, you know, part of what God rejoices in.
And I think this reminds us not to take things for granted.
Mhm.
To take. I was talking to my family earlier tonight, and it dawned on me that when I think about people not having, I don't really think about myself. I think about other people, and that's not a good thing because I'm taking for granted what I do have when I do that. When I did that in that conversation, and I go, you know, I'm thinking about others that, oh, they have it so bad, or they should, and I should appreciate it and be able to recognize that everything we're reading here can easily be forgotten. And we just go on because it is such, God has it in such routine manner, if you will. You know, he's going to take care of us, that we can then take it for granted and not pause in our days and say, at least in my day, and say thank you, or it didn't have to be this way, but you are providing and you are taking care of me and so many other people. So I think that's the reminder that hits me, is that I can easily forget the provisions that he freely gives. And some people get more than others, especially in our capitalistic world, but still, he's the provider.
It's a really good point. We sort of we see the world kind of from this sort of scientific perspective. It's a little different perspective than the psalmist saw the world in creation from. We see it. We sort of explain everything. We know the reason the weather does what it does. We know why the sun goes down and the moon comes up, and it's easy for us to think, because of that, you know, God is not really a part of it. I mean, he made it, but he's not really a part of it. And the psalmist wants us to see God kind of in all of it, all the time, and just be aware of his presence all the time. I'm always reminded of, I think it's Shenandoah, isn't it? The Jimmy Stewart saying grace. Thank you for the food we've been given, God. We planted it, we harvested it, we made it. We're not sure what you had to do with it, but thank you all the same. and I think sometimes we're like that. I think we can easily, you know, kind of fall into that trap. But on the other hand, he was trying to thank God, right? Even if he didn't really know how to do it and how to parse it all out, he was trying to to thank God. So maybe that's enough. So I will sing to the Lord all my life, he finishes. I'll sing praises to my God as long as I live. May my meditation be pleasing to him as I rejoice in the Lord. But may sinners vanish from the earth and the wicked be no more. I think the thought is with this, with this beautiful creation that God has, there's no place for the wicked. There's no place for the sinners. They don't fit. And so may they be gone. I don't think he's necessarily meaning, wipe them all out, though maybe he is. We have that in the Psalms sometimes. But I think it's just recognizing that there's not a place for sin and wickedness in a creation that's as good and shows God's faithfulness the way this one does. The result should be always that we please God and sing praise to him as long as we live and rejoice in him.
Well, since the Lord doesn't want to lose anybody, I think maybe he wants the wicked to repent.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he doesn't want to destroy anybody. So
Absolutely. There's repentance. That's the best way to handle the wicked. Let's get them so they're not wicked anymore, right?
yeah, change of heart.
Let's help them.
It could happen.
Turn to God and because that doesn't fit with the creation that God has given us. Anything else? He doesn't mention snow. I think Joe mentioned snow. Psalmist doesn't mention snow. So I don't know if snow is good. Yeah, I guess it is. I guess snow is good. What else? Well, thanks, everybody. It's good to be with you and get to see you all and hear your thoughts. Share this time together. Really means a lot to me.
Well, thank you.
You guys have a nice week, and
You
You
too.
Patrick.
talk to you
Good night,
soon.
everybody.
God bless.
God bless.
Hi, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Stay healthy.
Good night.
Good night.